Children and families are in crisis. More than ever, they're being exposed to violence, abuse and neglect. And the fallout is devastating. Welcome to Stories from Berry Street, a podcast that explores how one of Australia's largest independent children and family services organisations dedicates itself to keeping children, young people and families safe, thriving and hopeful. I'm your host, Richelle Hunt. Join me as I talk to some extraordinary people at Berry Street and discover the realities of working in child protection and family violence spaces, the incredible work that's being done to address the rising tide of harm and violence, and what we as a community can do to help.
This parent gave us some feedback that now she feels confident, she has the skills and strategies, and she's not scared to be a parent, because she was so worried in the beginning that she was going to be rejected by her child by putting in some rules. But now she realises that being a firm but loving parent is so important, and she's very thankful for MST and just what she's learnt.
That's Laura Vainikka, Clinical Supervisor for the Multisystemic Therapy program, or MST. In her 7 years at Berry Street, she's seen firsthand how intervening early with programs like MST can keep families together and can positively impact the lives of young people. As well as Laura, I'm talking in this episode to Tim Pedlow, who's spent his career supporting children and families facing hardship and violence. And as Berry Street's Regional Director in South East Victoria, he oversees the MST program. The child protection system is overburdened, and more children are being removed from their homes than ever before, because vulnerable families and carers are struggling to cope with the cost of living, housing instability and mental health issues. Early intervention can help ease this burden and help families before they spiral out of control. So, I'm starting with Tim to understand what early intervention actually means and what it aims to do.
Early intervention within the sector is often referred to as supporting families early before they hit the child protection system. So it's often sector language to describe service responses before children become involved in child protection or before they're removed and placed in out-of-home care.
What kinds of programs does Berry Street offer in the early intervention space, and how do they aim to keep families together safely?
Berry Street provide a number of early intervention programs, including placement prevention and reunification programs. Programs like Integrated Family Services, which is an in-home parenting support program. We provide parenting groups as well. We provide the L2P program, which supports young people to get their driver's licence. And then we provide evidence-based programs such as Multisystemic Therapy, MST, and Safe Care, which are evidence-informed programs to help keep kids safely at home or to help reunify those children back into their parents' care, which helps keep children safe.
So what happens when families don't get this? They don't get the support that they need early enough?
So the worst case scenario would be a child may be removed from that parent's care and becoming involved in the child protection system. So the importance to intervene early is to make sure that parents can be supported in the earliest possible time frame. So if I use an example of if a young mum's got postnatal depression, she's grown up in the out-of-home care system herself, she may not have had a role model and a positive parenting figure herself and may not have the skills or the resources to be able to respond to her baby the best way that she can. So a program like Safe Care, which is an early intervention evidence-based model to support mums or dads with kids 0 to 5 years of age, is a really tangible, hands-on, in-the-home parenting service to support a parent around child safety, their health and development, and also parent-child interactions to increase bonding and attachment between baby and their parent. If parents don't get the support they need early, things can go backwards, and they can go backwards fairly fast. There's a lot of societal pressures at the moment. We know cost of living pressures are on families. Since COVID, there's an increase in mental health issues as well, plus societal issues such as family violence and youth crime. So if we can intervene with families earlier, the cost benefits both for the family unit but also the community as well are huge.
I guess that touches on intergenerational trauma, doesn't it? If the mum doesn't have those skills, and then stopping that intergenerational trauma from being passed on to her child.
Yeah, absolutely. And often we do look at things through a middle class mindset, but it's important that we do remind ourselves that not every parent has had an upbringing where they've had a really positive role model, or they may have been exposed to abuse themselves, or a parent's poor mental health or drug and alcohol misuse. And then we often see that cycle repeat itself. And probably another good example to explain it is we've seen with Aboriginal families in the stolen generation, where children removed from their culture and family have a lack of identity, and we see that they have much poorer social health outcomes. And where there haven't been supports put in place, they may grow up, become parents themselves, their children are exposed to something similar, whether it's poor mental health, drug and alcohol issues.
Are you starting to notice a greater recognition on intergenerational trauma and a greater understanding of it?
I think as a service sector, we're much more informed. The current government invested a lot of money in the sector, but more investment would be welcome. I think we're much more educated and equipped, and there's more research to help support services like Berry Street respond to families who have experienced trauma. And evidence-based models that have been brought into Victoria, such as MST, are an example of that.
There's clear evidence then that children and families benefit greatly from programs like MST. But it's the community and society more broadly that also benefit. As Tim goes on to explain, supporting families to stay together safely when the cracks first appear is a much cheaper endeavour than placing children and young people into the out-of-home care system. For example, a service like residential care is a particularly expensive solution where 3 or 4 young people live together in a home with paid staff.
And the economic benefits are huge. Social Ventures Australia conducted some research a few years ago which found the cost of a young person being in residential care costs around $345,000 per year. We know in Australia the average length of time a young person is in residential care, or resi, is around 4 years. An MST team can support up to 40 families a year. So the cost benefits in keeping, say, 40 families out is around $10 million. Wow. So not only is it the economic benefit, but the societal benefit to keep families intact as well is huge, and helping young people stay out of youth justice and crime, but also the earlier question around intergenerational trauma. Hopefully those young people can grow up, care for their kids in the best way they can too, and it has a generational impact on their kids as well into the future.
Can you explain the concept of adverse childhood events in the context of early intervention?
Adverse childhood events, they could be things like exposure to family violence. It could be exposure to a parent's poor mental health or a really traumatic event that child's been exposed to. We're lucky at Berry Street. We're a trauma-informed organisation. We have a program called Take Two, which is a therapeutic service to support parents and child, as well as we've got our own schools as well across the state. So kids who may not have been able to access mainstream school for whichever reason, or have been expelled, or they aren't attending a mainstream school themselves, Berry Street provide a flexible learning option through a Berry Street school as well. So there's a range of supports that Berry Street provide children and young people across the state.
Does it need more investment?
Yeah, more investment's always welcome. We have more families and children that we could support if we had more investment. There's always wait lists, and the more investment we had, the more support we could provide. And an example being with MST. MST started through a philanthropy from a number of organisations, including the ANZ Bank. That's now a state government-funded program in southeast Victoria, and it's hugely successful. If we had more funding, we could provide more programs like MST.
Youth crime is something that a lot of us are discussing at the moment. It's in the media. It's certainly an issue of concern for our community. So where does early intervention come into youth crime?
It's a really hot topic for us at the moment, as we all know. And what MST does, it supports young people 11 to 17 with antisocial behaviour, including offending. And the evidence behind MST and the research shows that it hugely prevents young people from entering care or custody. It reduces rates of serious antisocial behaviour and offending. And the 22-23 data that Berry Street have shows that 80% of kids involved in MST didn't end up within a youth offending program, and that their behaviour reduced significantly in terms of challenging behaviour for their parents.
Every time I meet someone from Berry Street, inevitably the answer will come back to the entire community either being involved, being aware, or benefiting in some way. Is this an entire community approach that's needed, do you think?
Look, I think it is, and we benefit greatly from volunteers, whether it's some of our older population helping out our L2P program, but we also need more foster carers as well. So if someone's thinking about being a foster carer, we'd love to hear from you.
Let's end on a hopeful note. What do you think the future looks like if families can get the support they need sooner before they reach crisis point?
The ideal is that we keep kids at home safely. So if we can intervene early with programs like Safe Care at MST, then hopefully those kids and families can function independently away from the service system. It prevents children being placed into out-of-home care, and also it prevents children coming into contact with the youth justice system as well.
So not only is MST working, but it's filling a gap at a time when, as Tim said, foster carer numbers are dropping and residential care placements are limited. If MST can take the burden off at the top of the funnel, then surely we need to roll it out more widely, right? Let's get Laura Vainikka's perspective now. As clinical supervisor for the Multisystemic Therapy program, Laura explains what MST does and what it looks like for children and families day to day. So tell us about multisystemic therapy. What does it aim to do? How does it work?
So it's an evidence-based model, an early intervention program that focuses on working with parents and teenagers who might have some complex behaviours. So we're talking about like teen aggression in the home, running away, substance use, offending behaviour. And we're a very intensive service, so we're in the home 2 to 4 days a week, but it's short term, so 5 months. And the focus really is, by the time we close, that the parents have the skills and the strategies to keep going, to respond to the behaviours of concern. And the reason why they call it multisystemic, out of multisystemic therapy, is because we see the young person, we see the different systems that influence them. So we're talking about peers, school, community, and obviously family. And we're different to other clinical models. So other clinical models often focus on individual therapy, whereas we're focused on the young person, but also the family and the wider systems.
So the village concept, the idea that it takes a village, yeah? So
Yes,
looking
it
at
does.
who influences this person's life and their choices and decisions.
Exactly. And often in our work, we are thinking about who else is around in the family that can support them, because you can't do it alone. The purpose of MST really is to empower the parents to have the skills and the strategies to keep going when we close. That's our aim. So we see the parents as like key to behaviour change. Like they're the most influential people in their kids' lives, and often they don't realise that, or they don't know how to influence their kids' behaviour. So that's when we kind of jump in. We work alongside parents as a team and just understand why, like what's happening and why the young person's behaving the way they are, and come up with some strategies together.
So what sort of strategies, when you go in and you work side by side with the parent, and it's quite intensive work, what sort of things are you doing?
One thing that really comes up quite often is like school refusal. So we're in the home in the morning helping the parents get the young person up, and we have some strategies we kind of work on depending on the kid, because every young person's individual and what's happening for them. So when we come into the homes, we often identify what the referral behaviours are and what's happening, and what's the family's first point that they want to work on, like what's the issue that's really pressing for them. And then, for example, it might be the parents haven't really set clear expectations that they want the young person home by curfew or attending school. So we kind of help the parent have that conversation with the kids, set in some clear expectations, rewards and consequences. We work with the school. So, for example, sometimes the young person hasn't been at school for a long time, so we try to understand what's happening in the school and in the classroom, that we can, support the young person to engage in education better.
Does it take time to build trust and a relationship with both the child and the parent?
Yes, MST practitioners are pretty good at that. Like, we're quite persistent and we just really highlight the parent's strengths, and that's what's really important.
The role of early intervention, which you mentioned, and the power of early intervention, how important is that?
Very important. It means the young people aren't embedded in the behaviour, and you'll often see in the news like repeat offending of the youth. If we can get in there earlier rather than later, then we can put in strategies quickly and help families stay together and to live safely together. Get them back to school, get them back with their positive friends. It is a lot easier to work on those behaviours. We're going to see less kids in residential care, less kids in out-of-home care, in custody and remand, in juvie. So if we can get in there earlier, then we can try and prevent that cycle.
Of the families that Laura has worked with, I wanted to get a better idea about the situation they find themselves in. What do the challenges look like on the ground? And how are families moving through the system?
The first thing that comes to mind is the financial hardship that many families are experiencing at the moment, with rising living costs. Some of the families are working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. And when I think about our intervention, often we're trying to get kids into pro-social activities, into sport, but it's just so expensive for families to be able to afford sport. We also have housing, that's a massive issue for many of our families. We're often advocating for better housing options. But unfortunately, families are on waiting lists for years. Or then if they're trying to get a private rental, it's just not affordable. A lot of our families who are in housing, it's overcrowding, and then you've got multiple young people sharing rooms, and it's just difficult. Another thing that comes up is a lot of our families are referred from child protection, and often they'll need a few contacts with child protection before they're even flagged for the MST program. So that means that we're not able to get in there as early as we'd like to, always. For example, I was speaking to police, had a meeting with them, and they were really wanting to refer some young people to MST because the parents are desperate for help and don't know what to do. But there's no child protection involvement, so they're not able to access the service. And we don't have funding at the moment for community referrals. I think if we can get referrals from police and from schools, that will just be a game changer. I think we can get in earlier.
That goes back to the village concept, the idea of actually including things like police in that conversation, which isn't often the case. They're often the last resort when things have gone pear-shaped.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think for MST, that's what we do. We work closely with schools and with police, and we're all kind of seeing the same issues and worries at the moment in the community with youth. And it's just so frustrating that we don't have the funding to help the kids who really need the help and families that really are desperate for help.
I love the idea that the police are coming to you saying we need to get this young person into MST, into multisystemic therapy. They believe that it works and that it will break the cycle of offending or disadvantage or whatever it may be. That must be incredible for you to know that they too believe in this program.
Yeah, no, it's great to see that we're having the impact and word spreading to the community and to police especially.
So you mentioned before that it's an intensive program, that it runs for 5 months. So does that mean you're working for that 5 months intensively with that family? You're on call pretty much 24/7 for that 5-month period. How does it work?
Yes, we work very intensively, and I think that's why we achieve the outcomes that we do, because we are focusing on the behaviour change every day with the families. And we do run an on-call system, so practitioners take turns being on call 24/7, so families can call us in crisis and we can talk to them on the phone, problem solve, and a lot of services don't do that, so it's just providing them with that 24-hour support if they need it.
What might a parent call you for in that period if something's not going to plan, if they're worried, if a conflict has risen? What would a parent call you about?
Often there might be an argument's kind of escalated and the young person's engaging in some teenage aggressive behaviour towards the parent. So it's kind of helping them problem solve and talk through some de-escalation strategies just to help the young person calm down and keep the family safe in that situation.
So being mindful of not identifying any particular service user, can you tell us maybe one or two stories of someone that has stuck with you?
Yeah, definitely. I worked with this family, single parent, and she had 6 children, and she was working full time, and one of her sons had just got caught up in the wrong crowd, and he started to commit crimes. So was involved in like car thefts, and Mum was so worried. She didn't know what to do. And when I first met her, she just didn't have any hope. She was just feeling very hopeless and didn't think anything would change. So this young person was remanded multiple times, and we worked very intensely together to put in some rules at home, to help Mum speak to her son about her worries and concerns, and then also for Mum to spend like quality time with her son, and also to keep him away from this negative peer group.
And it worked?
Yes, so the key to change was when Mum realised that she actually could influence her son's behaviour. And that's what we see, like when families understand that they actually are the most influential people in their children's lives, not the MST practitioner, not a teacher, not a counsellor. It's that parent-child relationship. It's like life-changing. As soon as she realised that, she was unstoppable.
Well, once you give them the skill and the tools, then they can apply that in the next circumstance that may arise, either with that child or with another child. It just makes doing life easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And she was very persistent. And as soon as she had some hope, it changed. Like the co-offenders would knock on the door, but she'd tell them to leave. And she was very persistent. They'd knock on the door the next day and she's like, you need to leave. We worked on some strategies in the morning, and she worked very hard to get his son back to school, and it worked. But it's because of her perseverance.
Amazing. And how is he now? Do you know?
Yeah, so when we closed, he wasn't offending any longer. He was spending time with positive peers, his brothers, playing basketball. He was back at school. We got him into a work experience opportunity. He was looking for jobs. Mum was so happy, and it was so funny to hear from her at the end because she mentioned, I don't need you guys anymore.
That's what you want to hear, I guess.
Exactly right. And that's what we aim for, like behaviour change to be sustainable, like when we close with the family.
Go Mum. Go you guys. That's such a great story. So in your career, and you've been at Berry Street for 7 years now, which story has touched you the most? I mean, you've highlighted some of the benefits of being able to intervene early and to keep a family safe and together. What's kind of stayed with you?
I worked with a family, a mother who had a teenager just returned to her care, and she hadn't been in her care for years. So the mother had her own trauma experiences and substance use challenges, like a very vulnerable family. And the young person presented with some complex behaviours that were increasing. So she just started to run away, had just been involved in some petty crime with some peers and wasn't attending school. There was also concerns about some aggressive behaviour at home towards Mum. And Child Protection were very concerned. They mentioned that we really need an urgent MST referral or this young person could be removed. So we worked very closely with Mum, helped to put some rules at home and really coached her to be a firm but warm parent. And we also focused on reducing arguments at home, so having some clear strategies for Mum and the young person. And she just engaged in the program so well and did everything like we suggested. And by the closure, the young person had re-engaged back at school. There was no more aggressive behaviour and she was no longer running away. And we saw the young person spending more time with her school friends, which was great to see.
In reaction to young people offending, people tend to ask, where are the parents? What are they doing? But like we've heard many times on this podcast, often the parents have their own complex needs and issues that contribute to the family dynamic, which MST actually helps address. I wonder then what it's like for Laura to go through the MST process and witness a family unit evolve and transform for the better.
Yeah, it's great. And this parent gave us some feedback that now she feels confident, she has the skills and strategies, and she's not scared to be a parent because she was so worried in the beginning that she was going to be rejected by her child by putting in some rules. But now she realises that being a firm but loving parent is so important. And she's very thankful for MST and just what she's learnt.
What an amazing service. It feels like, imagine if every parent had an on-call service that they could ring and to talk them through, especially when it's heated and you're stressed and you don't know what to do. What kind of reaction do you get from the parents that they have this intensive service from you for 5 months? What do they say to you? What do they tell you?
We've received some really positive feedback from most of our families, and I think the main thing is they realise that they actually can influence their kids' behaviour, that they're the most important people in their child's life, and not the MST practitioner or a teacher or a counsellor, it's the parents. And when they realise that, their hope increases and their just confidence to put in the parenting skills and strategies that we kind of recommend consistently and successfully.
They walk out super parents. Hey?
They do. It's really great to see. Like, it's just 180 change. Just seeing the change that happens in these young people's lives. And for example, like a young person who's been disengaged from school for over 12 months and getting them back to mainstream school is massive. And just to see their smile on their face and that they did it and the parents did it, it keeps you going. You see the change and it's worth it.
You must see the pride too. They must be proud of themselves that they've managed to get their lives back on track.
Yeah, definitely. And you'll speak to them and they're like, oh, yeah, my life is better.
Working in a system that's bursting at the seams with at-risk children and families and lots of bureaucracy is no easy feat. But the inroads being made with early intervention is quite incredible. MST is just one example of what can be achieved by kids and families if they're given targeted support early enough. Investing more in early intervention makes so much sense, economically, to ease the burden on the system, and of course, to give children, young people and families a fighting chance to secure the future they deserve. You've been listening to Stories from Berry Street, a podcast for Berry Street, produced by Sound Cartel. Find out more about how you can support Berry Street at berrystreet.org.au. Listen out for more episodes on everything from providing safe homes, reimagining the system, and healing childhood trauma. Subscribe free wherever you listen to podcasts. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic, family or sexual violence, please contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and Berry Street acknowledges Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands, skies and waterways across Australia.